All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're tackling some major changes in how the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints supports its youth.
You could say that.
We're going straight to the source. Elder Quentin L. Cook's talk, Adjustments to Strengthen Youth, from back in the October 2019 General Conference.
Yeah, it's almost like a time capsule,
Right.
capturing this moment where the world is already changing so fast.
And Elder Cook even uses smartphones as an example, right? Like incredible potential, but also, whoa, some risky stuff for young minds too.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it feels like he was almost predicting how much faster things would change,
Oh, yeah.
even from 2019 to now.
It's wild, right?
It is.
It makes you think they were really paying attention.
Well, the church was definitely paying attention.
Right.
And Elder Cook laid out these three main things they were doing.
Okay.
You've got the updated curriculum, stuff they use at home, a brand new program for all the youth activities. And then, this is what we're diving into today,
Okay.
the big organizational changes.
Big changes. Okay, so walk me through this. What was the church really trying to achieve with all these organizational shifts? What was the big idea?
It boils down to putting youth at the center,
Okay.
not just saying it, but actually changing how things work to give young people more ownership, more responsibility, and they're doing it at younger ages.
Interesting.
It's like it all ties back to this emphasis on personal agency.
Right, that's a big deal in the church.
Huge.
But I can see how some people might hear more responsibility for youth and think, wait, is the church stepping back?
Right, right.
It's not hands-off, though, right?
No, not at all. It's more about empowering them, not like abandoning them,
Gotcha.
shifting things so they're more involved in their own development.
So the adults are still there.
Yeah, guiding, supporting.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So give me an example. Where do we actually see this playing out in the changes they made?
Well, one of the biggest ones is how the Aaronic priesthood is structured at the ward level.
Okay, the ward, that's the local congregation. Okay, so remind me what changed there.
So they stopped having ward young men presidencies.
Which were?
The youth themselves were in those leadership positions.
Okay.
And instead, the bishoprics, those are the adult leaders of the ward,
Right.
they take on a more direct leadership role with all the Aaronic priesthood quorums.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty big change. Were people concerned about, like, taking away leadership from the youth?
Oh, yeah, there were tons of discussions about that.
I bet.
But the idea was to line things up better with the doctrine. You see, Elder Cook, he even quotes Doctrine and Covenants 107.15. It says, the bishopric holds the keys of the Aaronic priesthood,
Okay.
meaning they have the authority, the responsibility, to preside over anyone holding the Aaronic priesthood.
Which is the young men.
Yep, 12 to 18 years old.
So it's less about, like, youth are doing this wrong and more about, let's make sure things are working how they're supposed to.
Exactly, bringing things into harmony, you could say.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they even get super specific about who's responsible for what.
Science.
So you've got the bishop working directly with the priest. They're usually 16 to 18. The first counselor focuses on the teachers, 14, 15.
Okay.
Second counselor gets the deacons. They're typically 12, 13 years old.
So each age group has their own person from the bishopric. Makes sense.
Yeah, and it's not like the youth are just left to figure everything out on their own.
Okay, good, because I was just thinking...
No. There are still adult advisors. They work right alongside the young men.
In the presidencies.
Yep, mentoring, training, supporting them.
So they still get that experience.
Oh,
Absolutely working with adults, learning from them.
and it creates this really interesting dynamic,
Yeah, like a two-way street kind of thing.
Yeah, like you've got that direct connection between the bishopric and each young man, but the youth still get to lead,
Right.
learn from those experienced adults.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you can't forget the cultural shift this represents.
Oh, I'm sure that was a big deal.
Huge. By putting that direct connection between the bishopric and the Aaronic priesthood front and center.
The church was making a statement
Oh, yeah.
about how important it is to prepare young men for leadership.
Not just in the church either.
But in life.
Exactly.
It makes you realize this wasn't just like rearranging the furniture.
No, it was a signal about priorities.
Totally.
And speaking of priorities, we should talk about how this affects the role of the bishop overall.
Yes. Because they're not just responsible for the young men, right? They've got everyone in the ward.
Adults, kids, families, the whole shebang.
So how did this change fit into that?
Well, Elder Cook actually quotes a scripture that gets right to the heart of it.
Okay, let's hear it.
One of the scriptural duties of the bishop is to preside over the priests and to sit in council with them, teaching them the duties of their office.
So it's about being present, teaching, guiding them, not just like overseeing from a distance.
Exactly. Being involved in their development.
And he even gives an example, right?
He does. About a bishop helping a young man who was struggling with pornography.
That's such a tough issue.
It is.
And the bishop didn't just work with the young man by himself. He brought in his parents, too.
He did, which is a good reminder, right, that young people are part of families.
Right.
It's not just about fixing problems in isolation.
It's the whole family.
Exactly. Building healthy relationships, healthy environments.
Where young people can thrive.
So it's parents, families, the whole work community.
It's a team effort.
It is.
Okay, but now I'm wondering about the young women.
Yeah.
Because we've talked a lot about young men.
That's true.
Did these changes mean less attention for the young women?
Not at all. Actually, a lot of the changes in the years leading up to this talk were about freeing up the bishop's time.
Okay.
So he could focus more on all the youth.
Both young men and young women.
Exactly. And one example is back in 2018, there were some big changes to how the Melchizedek priesthood quorums and relief societies work.
Okay, just as a reminder, the Melchizedek priesthood quorums, those are the adult men, right?
Yes.
And relief society is for the women.
Right. Okay.
For that.
So they started taking on more responsibilities, things that maybe used to fall more on the bishop, like missionary work, supporting members in need, temple and family history stuff.
Okay, so the bishop still had overall responsibility, but
You could delegate some of the work.
to capable leaders.
Exactly. And Elder Holland even said, and I'm quoting here, the bishop remains, of course, the presiding high priest of the ward.
Okay.
This new alignment should let him preside over the work of the Melchizedek priesthood and the Relief Society without requiring him to do the work of either of those bodies.
That's a great quote. It really shows the goal.
Right.
It's about clarity, everyone knowing what they're responsible for.
From the bishop to the Relief Society president to the Elders Quorum president, everyone.
It's about making the whole system work better.
More efficient, more balanced.
But the bishop couldn't just delegate everything, right?
Oh, definitely not.
There were still things he absolutely had to be involved in.
For sure. Elder Cook's clear about that.
Like,
Well, there's his role as common judge.
okay, remind me what that means.
That's where he helps members resolve conflicts, helps them repent of serious sins.
Okay.
Then there's looking after those in need in the ward,
Right.
and of course, strengthening the youth.
So he's still a central figure.
Very much so.
But it sounds like the church was trying to make his job more manageable.
Yeah, streamline things so he could really focus on those core areas.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about how they were trying to free up the bishop's time and resources to be more present for all the youth. But I'm curious about the specific changes for young women.
Okay.
What were some of the key adjustments there?
Well, there's one big change that really stands out.
Okay, tell me.
Ward young women presidents now report directly to the bishop.
Now, that might seem like a small detail,
Yeah.
but it's actually a pretty big change.
It is. It's a shift in how things are structured.
Hold on. So before this, they didn't always report to the bishop.
Yep.
He could delegate that.
To one of his counselors.
Interesting.
But this new way emphasizes how important the young women are.
By giving them that direct line,
To the bishop?
the one with the keys for the ward,
Exactly.
wow, that's a big deal. It's a statement,
It is.
about how much the church values young women.
It makes you wonder why they made that change, though, right?
Yeah. And what they hoped would happen because of it.
That's a great question, and it's something we'll dive into in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, can't wait. But before we move on, I have one more question about this.
Yeah.
You said the young women presidents report to the bishop now?
Uh-huh.
What about the Relief Society president?
Oh, she still reports to the bishop.
Okay.
It's all about balance,
Right, making sure both the young women and the adult women have a voice.
and the direct connection
Yeah.
to the bishop.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here at the ward level.
We have.
But these changes went beyond the ward, right?
Oh, yeah.
There are stake level changes too.
The stake is basically a group of wards, like a bigger area.
Right, so those ripples were definitely felt there too.
Absolutely.
Are you ready to dive into that?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's explore how those organizational changes impacted things at the stake level.
And how it all affected youth leadership and support.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, here we go. So at the stake level, things got a little more intricate.
Okay, the stake level, remind me what that is again.
Right, so it's like a bunch of wards together.
Okay. A bigger area?
Yeah, and we still had stake young men presidencies.
So they were still leading the young men across the whole stake.
Exactly, but how they were, like, supported and guided, that changed a bit.
I remember remember reading something about high counselors having a bigger role.
They did?
Can you remind us what a high counselor is?
Sure, they're men called to be leaders within the stake.
Okay.
They advise the stake presidency.
Which is kind of like the bishopric, but for the whole stake.
That's a good way to put it.
And they have different assignments, right?
Yeah, they oversee programs and organizations.
So like a team of specialists.
You could say that.
Okay, so how did all of this change with the youth programs?
Well, one high counselor would be assigned as the stake young men president.
So he'd lead the stake young men presidency?
Yep, work with the young men in the stake.
And this is where it gets interesting.
It does.
Because other high counselors were assigned to young women and primary too.
Right.
Primary is the children's organization.
Yep, and these three high counselors, they form the Stake Aaronic Priesthood Young Women Committee.
So a whole committee just for the youth programs.
Pretty much.
That's a lot of focus.
It was.
And I'm wondering, did this committee have anything to do with the new Children and Youth Initiative?
You're thinking ahead.
Well, Elder Cook mentioned it, but we don't have all the details from this talk.
Right, but even though he doesn't go into specifics,
It seems likely this committee was involved somehow.
well, I think so. The program launched just a few months after this talk.
And it was all about a new way of helping children and youth grow.
Spiritually, socially, intellectually, physically, all of it.
Wow, that's a lot.
It was a big change.
So this committee probably helped make sure the program rolled out smoothly?
Across all the wards in the stake.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and remember the stake Sunday school president?
Mm-hmm.
He was a high counselor too.
Right.
So he might have been on the committee as well.
Bringing even more experience to the table?
It shows how the church was trying to connect leaders from different areas.
To work together for the youth.
Exactly, a more unified approach.
So, from the ward to the stake, a whole support system for the youth.
A big safety net.
But even with all these changes,
Elder Cook hinted there was more to come.
like the church was just getting started.
Right, he talked about more adjustments on the horizon.
And those changes weren't fully detailed in this talk,
No.
but they showed the church was committed to adapting.
And refining how they supported their youth.
For example, he talked about the Bishopric Youth Committee becoming something called the Ward Youth Council.
Yeah, just the name change alone
Suggests a shift, right?
towards more involvement from the youth.
In planning and decision-making.
Exactly.
What do you think about that?
I think it's great, giving them a way to share their ideas,
To have a voice.
to contribute,
And it tells them their opinions matter.
and that they can help shape things.
Well, I like that.
And then there's the whole mutual thing.
Oh, yeah, that sparked a lot of conversation.
It did. Remind me, what did mutual refer to?
It was the traditional name for youth activities.
Right, like all kinds of activity.
Weekly gatherings, dances, service projects, sports.
The whole shebang.
But they got rid of the word mutual.
They did. Replaced it with more specific names.
Like young women activities or Aaronic priesthood quorum activities.
Yep, more descriptive.
I remember some people were sad to see it go.
Oh, definitely. It was tradition.
But others thought it was time for a change.
A more modern approach.
Why do you think they made this change?
I think they wanted more clarity.
More intentionality, like each activity had a clear purpose.
Exactly. And a clear audience.
Instead of just lumping everything together.
It helped tailor activities to each group.
Young men, young women, children.
Each with their own needs and interests.
So a subtle change.
But it shifted the focus.
Something more deliberate, more targeted.
Exactly.
And then there's the change to the ward budget.
Yeah, how they handled money for youth activities.
Before, the ward got one big chunk of money, right?
And the bishopric decided how to spend it.
But now,
It's divided between young men and young women.
based on how many youth are in each group.
And primary gets their own amount, too,
So everyone gets what they need.
based on their actual needs.
That seems much fairer.
And more transparent.
Any other benefits?
I think so.
Yeah.
Having separate budgets encouraged better planning.
And more thoughtful spending.
And it gave youth a chance to be involved in budget decisions.
Learning about finances.
Real-life skills.
Okay, so financial responsibility and youth empowerment.
Two birds, one stone.
I like it. And there's one last change I want to talk about.
Okay, what is it?
The shift from auxiliary to organization.
Ah, yes, the language
It
changed.
seems small.
But it's not. It reflects a different mindset.
So for a long time,
The young men, young women, primary, Sunday School Relief Society.
they were all called auxiliary organizations.
But now it's just organizations.
No more auxiliary.
Nope.
What do you think that means?
I think it means they're not secondary anymore,
Not less important than the priesthood.
which holds the authority in the church.
Right.
So it elevates their status.
Acknowledges how much they contribute.
They're not just add-ons.
They're essential partners.
It's a subtle change.
But powerful. It shows how the church sees these organizations now.
Exactly, and it reinforces this idea that everyone has something to contribute.
No matter your age or your role.
We all have something to offer.
It's amazing how small changes can have such a big impact.
It is, especially in a big organization like the church.
So we've talked about the ward level, the stake level.
And all the restructuring.
But I'm still curious about the why behind all of this.
The driving force.
What do you think it was?
I think the world was changing.
And changing fast.
And the church needed to adapt.
To meet the needs of the youth.
In this new world.
Prepare them for challenges.
Help them develop their talents.
Become the leaders of tomorrow.
Exactly. It wasn't just what they were doing.
But how they were doing it.
Right. There's this emphasis on personal agency.
Youth leadership, creating a supportive environment.
Where they can thrive.
And we're still seeing the impact of these changes.
Oh, yeah.
They've definitely made a difference.
Sparked conversations, made people think.
And ultimately,
helped us understand how important it is to support the rising generation.
It makes you wonder, though, about the bigger picture.
What do you mean?
Well, we're seeing more focus on youth voices in society in general.
It's true.
Like climate change, social justice.
Young people are leading the way.
So maybe these changes in the church
reflect that larger trend.
It's something to think about.
It is.
But before we go too far down that road,
let's bring it back to the changes themselves.
We've talked about the details.
But what's the real takeaway here?
I think it's about trusting the youth.
Giving them opportunities.
Recognizing their potential.
To make a difference.
Creating spaces where they feel valued.
Heard. Empowered.
I think that's a great way to put it.
And that message goes beyond the church.
It does.
It's a call to action for all of us.
To invest in our youth.
Listen to them. Support them.
Help them flourish. We've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
Explored the context, the changes, the implications.
It's been a journey.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one last thought.
I'm listening.
We've talked about how the church was trying to adapt and empower its youth.
Right. Responding to a changing world.
But here's what I keep thinking about.
What's that?
How do the back of me fit into all of this?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. It's easy to talk about these big changes.
The organizational stuff?
But what does it look like in our everyday lives?
Right. How do we actually make it real?
Exactly. So how do we do that? Give me some examples.
Well, think about the people you see every day.
Okay.
Do you have kids?
Ah.
Grandkids? Nieces? Nephews? Maybe neighbors or friends with teenagers.
Yeah, I know some teenagers.
Those are all opportunities.
To make a difference.
Exactly. And it starts with just being present.
Okay.
Really listening to them.
Like actually listening.
Yeah, ask them about their lives.
What they're thinking, what they're worried about.
Showing them you care about what they're going through.
Not just treating them like kids we have to, manage.
Right, like they're people with their own thoughts and feelings creating spaces where they feel safe to talk.
Even if we don't agree with them.
Exactly. Encouraging them to be curious.
Helping them figure out what they're good at.
Celebrating their wins, big or small.
It's about being a mentor, not just someone who tells them what to do.
I love that. Mentors, guides, cheerleaders, whatever works for you.
The point is, we have to be involved.
Actively engaged in their lives.
Supporting them, helping them grow. And I remember the church talking about giving youth more chances to lead.
Yeah, that was a big part of the changes.
So how can we do that in our own lives?
It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Like what?
It could be as simple as letting the young people in your life help make decisions.
Decisions that affect them.
Right, asking for their opinion.
Showing them that we value what they think.
And giving them real responsibility.
So instead of just telling them what to do,
we're working together.
Finding solutions as a team.
Exactly. And remember, leadership doesn't have to be a big formal thing.
Right. It can be small things.
Like encouraging them to plan a family activity.
Or organize a service project. Maybe teach someone else something they're good at.
It's all about recognizing their potential.
And giving them the space to step up.
Even in little ways.
And we have to be good examples ourselves, right?
Oh, absolutely. We have to walk the walk.
Like integrity, compassion, resilience.
Having a growth mindset.
Showing them what it means to live a good life. It's not just what we say.
It's what we do.
Actions speak louder than words.
They watch us,
They see how we treat people, how we handle tough situations.
They're learning from us all the time.
And we have a chance to be good influences. You've given us a lot to think about.
That's a lot to process.
And it feels like the changes the church made were just The beginning.
The first step in a much bigger journey
It's a challenge for all of us.
to do better for our youth.
To support them, empower them.
It's not just about being nice to them.
It's about recognizing that they're the future.
Investing in them is investing in our future.
Our families, our communities, our world. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this.
Okay, I'm ready.
How can you make a difference in the life of a young person?
That's a powerful question.
What can you do, starting today, to be a positive force in their life?
To help them become the best versions of themselves.
It's a challenge worth taking on.
And if we all do our part,
We can create a ripple effect of positive change.
that's bigger than any one of us.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great exploring all this with you,
I hope you learned something new.
and that you feel inspired to take action.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.